and I'm gonna teach you guys about water. So turn, face forward, come up close if you want. Pause with what you're doing, because this is your water demo. All right, you guys ready? Yes? From like 2 people. Yes, you guys are ready? Okay. All right, so the water that I have here is just very simple phthalo blue with a little bit of white. All right, there's not much going on there. In your guys' paintings, you already have a few highlights in there, probably. But we're just gonna start to build this from this ground level of just one basic color. And I'll show all the parts that are gonna go into this water. So with the water, you're gonna be using this brush right here for a lot of the water. I'm also gonna be using this brush right here. So that is my 1/4 inch angle and my, I think it's the number 10 round brush. So those are the 2 brushes I'm gonna be using. The color of the water that you use is gonna be dependent upon the color that you have in your painting. So don't try and match my exact colors. Think about saturation and unsaturation. Think about texture. Okay, so those are the kind of important key points for this. So in the back here, I want to lighten this up. So I'm gonna take, I've got phthalo blue and ultramarine blue as like my base blue that I'm using. And then I'm going to mix some white with it too. Water it down. Anytime that we do water, we want to make sure that the water is also mixed in with our paint. So I have a bit of an unsaturated white loaded on my, unsaturated light blue loaded on here. So I'm just gonna kind of layer this on. With water, the more layers that you have, the more realistic it will look. So notice that my brush is going 2 directions here. And while it's wet, you can add in some highlights too, while it's wet. So it's a good idea to be able to kind of work on multiple things at the same time. So I've got a few highlights that I can add in right here. I can grab this brush now and add in some highlights too. You can make a brighter light blue, start to add in a few highlights in some places, okay? You don't want those highlights in the back to be too distinct, so like this one is super bright, so I'm just gonna pull it out a little bit. So that unsaturated color I'm putting in the middle of my water to make it look like it's deeper in the middle. Kind of like that. And I'm unsaturating with orange and brown today. There's some of that unsaturated color there. If you want your water to be more murky, then unsaturate it more. Still avail a light wash to kind of overlay so you can see that texture that still shows through. Okay. All right, next. Along the bank, it's gonna get a little darker. So I'm gonna mix my color, which is a bit of it's a darker green. Again, water it down still though. And I'm gonna switch to my small brush so that I can really do details here. So I'm using this one. And I'm gonna go in along where the bank is going to be. Looks like I watered that down too much. Yep, watered it down too much. Mix the new color again here. It's better to have it watered down too much and then have to lighten it up than it is to put it down too heavy. Okay. There we go. That's better. So just along the edge of the bank there. I'm gonna do along the edge of the bank down here as well. And this is kind of like this is the reflection of the grass in the water right along the edge. I'm gonna add some of this down here as well. Every line that you add into the water, you wanna have be horizontal. So again, this is just right along the edge. That like unsaturated, dark blue-green essentially. It might be more brown if you have more brown in your land. But do you see how it's starting to get a little bit of depth? Can you guys see that or not? Okay. Okay. And I'll add a little bit down here as well. I like to have my round brush to be able to pull out any edges that may appear that I don't like. Darken it up a little bit more there. Because we're watering this down, having multiple layers is like super, super helpful. I'll add some here too. Pulling out the bottom of that. There we go. All right. And I think I'll put it in here too. I just moved the bank a little bit there. All right. So when working on the water, it's a good idea to have a little bit of some bank color to put in along the very bottom. That brush is not working well. Let me try again. When you do the grass along the edge, you want to have a flat brush, and then putting the bottom of the brush, the flat brush down here, and then I'm pulling up. And I'm going to plant this grass into the water that I just did. Then with my round brush, that part that just went over the water right there, while it's wet, I'm just gonna pull that out a little bit. And that helps it look like it's like kind of in the water a little bit. It's kind of fun. Got some grass here. And then my round brush. Just kind of go like that. See how that looks like it's planted into the water? This area isn't planted in yet. Gotta add some more. So I'm using my flat brush. And you can do this with a light color or with a dark color, depending upon what you want your bank to be. All right. Next thing for the water that I want to show is the reflections of the trees underneath. So you've got the reflection. Okay, this one right here, this one right here. You can put a little one right back there. So when looking at this, I've got a few trees to do some reflections of. This one is definitely going to get one. And to do reflections, I'm going to use a brush that I'm comfortable with, that I know that I can control, which for me is the flat 1/4 inch. So here is where the water starts. Pretty easy, just go straight down. Okay, here, that's where the water starts. So I go straight down. Here, I'm gonna go straight down. While that's wet, I'm gonna fuzz the edges just a little bit. Just in some places, especially for the ones that are further back, because they're not super crisp back there. I think this one would also have one. I'm gonna put one right here. I know it doesn't necessarily look like there's water there, but I'm gonna add one there anyway. So there's a shadow underneath that one. If the water went over here, then that one would have one underneath as well. So a good way to think about it is like, this is where it's rooted here, like this is where the water starts underneath it. So I can just put my brush right there and that's the direction, it just goes straight down. Okay, straight down, straight down. So that water starts to look reflective now. As I'm looking at this, it needs some more shadows down here. Okay. Use my round brush to just fuzz the edges a little bit. Where else does it need more? Dark along the bank. Do you see any places? Anyone? What about this area right here? Do you think that needs more? This spot right here. Yes, no? Yeah? It does. I move that bank and so it doesn't have as many layers underneath it. Just fuzz it out. Okay. I'm gonna add in some highlights on the bank right here because the sun light is here, and so this bank over here is gonna be a little bit lighter. I did the dark ones first because it needs to have like the ground for it to settle in on. And now I can choose what color of grass I want to put in there. So I'm changing my brush stroke and getting larger as I come forward more. Feels like this really needs to be highlighted. Right in there. Maybe even a little bit of orange in there too. So you still want the texture and stuff to show. You could even grab a liner brush and do some like cattails or something. So this is a really thin liner brush there. So just got a few kind of variations in the grass there. The more kind of variation that you have, the more natural it'll look. I don't know if you guys can see, but this is what my left hand looks like whenever I paint. Because I've got different brushes for different things, and I like to save time, so I just end up holding all of my brushes in my hand like this. Okay, for the water. I wanted to let that dry, which is why I worked on the bank a little bit, because some of the final steps for the water are the highlights that are on the very top of the water. So you have a few different options of brushes that you can use. You can even use the edge of a palette knife. I'm gonna use the liner brush for this. I like the way that it was working when I was doing these pieces of grass on the side. So I'm just gonna take some white, mix just a little tiny bit of blue with it, water it down, and try and see if I have the right amount of pigment to it. It should stand out. Okay. So right along the edge of the bank, up close. There's gonna be some water. Do you see how those little tiny bits right there? Gonna add one. Some right along the edge. You can even have a highlight go over on top of shadow or the reflection. Okay. And if you want to brighten up one spot of it, then you just add more reflections into one part. So let's say that I want this to be really bright. I'm just going to add some more on there. And if it gets too heavy, too fast, it's okay. Just use your round brush and pull it out. That area is a bit lighter now. All right. So I've talked about the shadows along the bank of the water. Okay. I've talked about the reflections of the tree trunk down into the water. Talked about the white highlights that are kind of cut in. You could do it, like I said, with a palette knife as well. I'll just show some of that really quickly. So to cut those in, I'm holding this still here. I've got a white loaded on the bottom here. And if you do this, you're only going to want to do it in the front portion because it's, you know, different texture. Something's up closer, it's going to have a higher contrast. It's going to be a bigger line. If you get a line that's too big, like that one right there, you can just come along and pull it out. Doesn't that kind of look like it's a little ripply right there? Because I let that line be not totally straight, but have a little bit of some edge to it, essentially. So that, maybe add another one right there. There we go. So I've got the highlights. Any questions?